Get on the ground! Now! Stop resisting!
I am not resisting, officer. I'm standing still. My hands are visible.
I don't care! Turn around and comply!
I have a service-connected knee injury. I cannot kneel. This is my vehicle.
You're being detained! Do not move!
You're making a mistake, officer, and you're being recorded.
The scream tore through the humid silence of a Texas afternoon. It wasn't a request. It was a hysterical command vibrating with a pitch of adrenaline that seasoned professionals recognize immediately as panic. But the man standing by the silver Ford F-150 wasn't panicking. He was standing perfectly still, his boots planted shoulder-width apart in the gravel, his large hands open and resting plainly on the hood of the truck. The Texas sun beat down on the scene, baking the asphalt of the farm-to-market road, creating shimmering waves of heat that distorted the horizon. "Officer, I am unable to comply with that specific command due to a service-connected knee injury, but I am standing still with my hands visible," the man said. His voice was a deep baritone, steady as a rock, contrasting sharply with the shrill shouting of the uniformed man pointing a Glock 17 at his chest. "I said get on the ground. Stop resisting. You are 1 second away from being lit up." Officer Kyle Braden was 27 years old, sweating profusely under his Kevlar vest, his finger trembling slightly against the trigger guard. He had pulled up 2 minutes ago, responding to a call about a suspect stripping a vehicle on the side of the highway. What he saw was a large black man in a polo shirt and cargo pants, standing next to a truck with the hood up. In Braden's mind, the narrative was already written: car thief. "I am not resisting," the man said, his eyes locked on the officer's sternum, not the gun. "My name is Elias Thorne. This is my vehicle. I have a blown radiator hose and I am waiting for a tow truck. My identification is in my back right pocket. My phone is on the passenger seat with the roadside assistance confirmation." "Shut your mouth. I don't care what you have. You look like the suspect described in the area," Braden yelled, stepping closer, closing the distance dangerously. He was violating basic tactical spacing fueled by a mixture of ego and fear. "Turn around, face the vehicle." Elias Thorne moved slowly, telegraphing every inch of motion. He turned his back to the officer, placing his hands back on the hood. He could hear the officer's heavy breathing behind him, the scuff of boots on gravel. Elias knew exactly what was happening. He had seen this look in men's eyes before, men who were armed, frightened, and unsure of their authority. But usually those men were insurgents in Fallujah or terrified conscripts in global conflict zones, not peace officers in rural Texas. "Officer, look at the license plate," Elias said calmly, staring at the Ford emblem on his grill. "It's a disabled veteran plate. It matches the registration I can show you if you let me reach for my wallet." "I told you to shut up." Braden slammed his hand onto Elias's shoulder, shoving him forward against the hot metal of the truck. "You're being detained for investigation of grand theft auto and resisting arrest." "You are making a mistake," Elias said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. "And you are being recorded." He nodded slightly toward the dash of his own truck, where a mounted phone was clearly facing the hood, and toward the officer's own body camera. "I am the law out here, pal," Braden sneered, grabbing Elias's left wrist and twisting it behind his back with unnecessary force. "And right now, you're just a criminal caught in the act." Elias didn't flinch at the pain in his shoulder. He didn't pull away. He simply took a deep breath of the hot, dusty air and began to count backward from 10 in his head. It was a technique he hadn't had to use in years, not since he took off the uniform. But as the handcuffs bit into his wrists, he knew that the war he thought he'd left behind had just found him on a roadside in his own country. "Before we go any further into this intense confrontation, I need you to understand exactly who Officer Braden had just put in handcuffs. This context is crucial because it highlights the massive disparity between the man with the badge and the man in the cuffs. If you believe that respect is earned and not just given because of a uniform, hit that like button right now." Officer Kyle Braden had been with the department for 18 months. He was known in the precinct for being hot-headed, the kind of guy who bought all the tactical gear, wore the sunglasses with the thin blue line, and talked loudly in the locker room about hunting wolves. He had 3 complaints against him in the last year for excessive force and verbal abuse, all of which had been dismissed by his supervisors as rookie enthusiasm. He was a man who demanded respect because he felt he was owed it purely because he had passed the academy and carried a gun. He saw threats where there were none because it made him feel like a warrior. The man he had just shoved against the truck, however, was the real thing. Elias Thorne was 54 years old. He didn't need to play dress-up to feel powerful. For 26 years, he had served in the United States Marine Corps. He retired as a master sergeant. But more than that, Elias was a legend in the scout sniper community. He had 4 combat deployments. He held a Silver Star for dragging 2 wounded Marines out of a kill zone in Ramadi while taking effective fire. He had a Purple Heart from an IED in Helmand Province. He had spent decades training young men to control their emotions, to slow their heart rates, to make life and death decisions with absolute precision under the most extreme pressure imaginable. Elias Thorne could have disarmed Officer Braden in less than 2 seconds. He could have ended the threat before Braden even realized he was in a fight. The reason Elias was standing still, the reason he was letting this young, aggressive man twist his arms and scream in his ear wasn't because he was afraid. It was because he was disciplined. He knew that any movement, any flinch would give Braden the excuse he was desperately looking for to pull that trigger. Elias was surviving this encounter the same way he survived the rooftops of Fallujah, by assessing the threat, calculating the variables, and executing the mission. The mission today was simply to get home to his wife alive. Braden didn't see a master sergeant. He didn't see a grandfather. He didn't see a man who had bled for the very Constitution Braden swore to uphold. He saw a black man in a nice truck on a lonely road, and his bias filled in the rest. He assumed criminality where there was only capability. The tragedy of this moment wasn't just the arrest. It was the arrogance. Braden had absolutely no idea that the suspect he was manhandling had forgotten more about rules of engagement and de-escalation than Braden would ever learn. Elias wasn't begging. He wasn't crying. He was observing. He was memorizing Braden's name tag, his badge number, the time of day, and the specific violations of civil rights occurring in real time. "You're going to sit in the back of my unit until I figure out whose truck this really is," Braden said, panting slightly as he tightened the cuffs. He shoved Elias toward the patrol car, a maneuver that was awkward given Elias's size and planted feet. "Officer Braden," Elias said, reading the name tag aloud for the benefit of the audio recording. "I am informing you again that I am the legal owner of this vehicle. I am requesting that you check my identification, which is in my back pocket. I am also informing you that I have a concealed carry permit, and my firearm is secured in the locked glove box separate from the ammunition as per state law." Braden froze for a second. The mention of a gun, even a legal one, made his eyes go wide. "You have a gun? Why didn't you say that immediately?" "I was attempting to before you screamed at me to get on my knees," Elias replied, his voice level. "I am following the duty to inform protocol. Now, are you going to verify my identity, or are you going to continue this unlawful detention?" "It's not unlawful if I have reasonable suspicion," Braden snapped. He opened the back door of his cruiser and pushed Elias inside. The back seat was cramped, the plastic hard and unforgiving. Elias had to duck his head significantly to fit. "Reasonable suspicion requires specific articulable facts," Elias said through the open window as Braden slammed the door. "Being a black man standing next to a broken-down truck in daylight does not constitute reasonable suspicion of a crime. That is a Fourth Amendment violation. Terry versus Ohio established that you cannot detain me without more than a hunch." Braden paused his hand on the door handle. He looked at Elias with a mix of confusion and anger. "You a lawyer or something? You think you know the law better than me?" "I know the Constitution," Elias said. "And I know that you haven't asked for my registration. You haven't run the plates. You haven't asked for my license. You went straight to your weapon and restraints. You are operating on bias, officer, and you are digging a hole you won't be able to climb out of." Braden scoffed, turning away to walk back to Elias's truck. "We'll see about that. I'm searching the vehicle for inventory prior to impound." "I do not consent to a search," Elias called out clearly. "I have not been arrested for a crime that warrants impoundment. AAA is 10 minutes away. You have no probable cause to enter that vehicle." Braden ignored him. He walked up to the silver F-150. He looked inside the cab. He saw the leather seats, the pristine dashboard, the mounted GPS. It was a nice truck, too nice in his mind for the man he just put in the back seat. He pulled on the handle. Locked. He cursed. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha. I have one male subject detained. I need a tow for an abandoned vehicle, possible stolen property." "Copy 4 Alpha. Confirm vehicle is abandoned. Subject is in custody. Vehicle is secured on the roadside. I'm going to need to pop the lock to inventory." Elias sat in the back of the cruiser, shaking his head. He watched Braden fumbling with a slim Jim from his trunk, trying to break into a truck that Elias had the keys for in his pocket. It was almost comical if it wasn't so infuriating. A simple conversation could have resolved this. "Sir, is this your truck?" "Yes, officer, here is my ID." "Okay. Need any help?" "No thanks, tow is on the way." "Have a good day." That was how it was supposed to go. That was how it went for thousands of other people every day. But not today. Not for Elias Thorne. The situation escalated when a minivan slowed down in the opposite lane. A woman in the passenger seat rolled down her window, her phone held up horizontally. She had seen the aggressive way Braden had shoved Elias. "Officer, why do you have that man in handcuffs?" she yelled across the road. Braden whipped his head around. "Keep moving. This is an active police investigation. Do not interfere." "I'm not interfering. I'm documenting," the woman shouted back. The van pulled onto the wide shoulder about 50 feet away. The woman got out, maintaining a safe distance, but kept her camera trained on Braden. Braden hated this. He hated being watched. It made him feel cornered. He marched back to his cruiser where Elias was watching the scene unfold. He opened the driver's side door and got in, cranking the AC, trying to cool down his flushed face. "You got friends showing up now," Braden muttered, glaring at Elias in the rearview mirror. "I don't know that lady," Elias said. "But she's doing her civic duty, just like you should be doing yours. Officer, look at my key fob. It's in my front pocket. If you press the button, the truck will unlock. That proves ownership. You don't need to break into it." "I'm not reaching into your pockets," Braden said dismissively. "I'll wait for the tow to open it." "This is ridiculous," Elias said, his patience thinning by a fraction. "I am a retired Master Sergeant of the United States Marine Corps. I am a combat veteran. I have done nothing wrong. You are violating my civil rights, and you are doing it on camera. That woman is recording. My dash cam is recording. Your body cam is recording. Every second you keep me in these cuffs adds to the settlement the city is going to have to pay me." Braden turned around in his seat, his face red. "I don't care if you're the President of the United States. You failed to comply with a lawful order. You resisted. That's why you're back there. You want to talk about rights? You have the right to remain silent. Use it." "I haven't been read my rights," Elias pointed out calmly. "Which implies you haven't formally arrested me yet. I am in cuffs in a police car. That is a de facto arrest without probable cause." Braden slammed his hand on the steering wheel. He knew the guy sounded smart, too smart. It made Braden nervous, but he had already committed. If he let him go now, he'd look weak in front of the witness across the road. He'd look like he made a mistake. And men like Kyle Braden would rather burn the house down than admit they left the stove on. "We're going to the station," Braden said, putting the car in gear. "We'll sort this out there." "You're leaving my truck on the side of the road?" Elias asked. "With the window down, my service dog's crate is in the bed. It's empty, but that's a $500 crate." Not my problem anymore, Braden said, pulling onto the road, kicking up dust as he peeled away, leaving the silver truck and the confused witness behind. Elias closed his eyes. He thought about his wife, Sarah. She was expecting him home for a barbecue. He thought about the steak marinating in the fridge. He took a deep breath. Secure the perimeter, he told himself. Maintain situational awareness. Survive. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. Braden drove fast, aggressive tailgating cars that didn't move out of his way quickly enough. Elias sat silently swaying with the motion of the car, his shoulders aching from the position of his arms. He didn't speak again. He had said what needed to be said. Now it was about letting the system hang itself. They pulled into the sally port of the station. Braden got out, checked his weapon, and opened the back door. He hauled Elias out, gripping his bicep. "Watch your head," Braden said, mocking his own previous aggression with a sarcastic tone. They walked through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. It was cool inside, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. The hum of fluorescent lights was the soundtrack to the misery of 100 arrests. Behind the high booking desk sat Sergeant Tom Miller. Miller was 62, with a gray crew cut and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and left in the rain. He was a Vietnam veteran, 101st Airborne. He had been a cop for 40 years. He had seen everything, and he had very little patience for nonsense. He looked up over his reading glasses as Braden marched Elias to the bench. Miller's eyes went from Braden's flushed, arrogant face to Elias's calm, stoic demeanor. He saw the way Elias stood erect, chin up, eyes scanning the room but not darting. He saw the boots. He saw the haircut. "What you got, Braden?" Miller asked, his voice gravelly. "Suspicious person resisting arrest, disorderly conduct." Braden rattled off, sounding proud. "Caught him stripping a truck out on Route 9. Refused to get on the ground." Miller looked at Elias. "That true son, you stripping trucks." "No, First Sergeant," Elias said instinctively, using the rank that matched Miller's aura even though Miller was a police sergeant. "I was waiting for AAA. My radiator hose blew. Officer Braden mistook me for a criminal." Miller's eyebrows shot up at the First Sergeant. He looked at Elias's hands cuffed behind his back. Then he looked at Braden. "You run his ID." "Not yet. He wouldn't show it to me without giving me a speech about the Constitution." Braden scoffed. "I got his wallet here." Braden pulled Elias's leather wallet from his tactical vest pocket and tossed it onto the counter. It landed with a heavy thud. Miller picked it up. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the Texas driver's license. Elias James Thorne. Then he flipped the flap. There, in the clear plastic window, was a Department of Defense retired identification card. Rank E8 Master Sergeant. Miller paused. He looked closer. Tucked behind the ID was a folded laminated card. A blue card, the kind Marines carry with their unit history. And a small metal challenge coin with the Scout Sniper logo, the skull and crosshairs. Miller's chest tightened. He looked up at Elias, really looked at him this time. He saw the scar on Elias's neck barely visible. He saw the faint outline of a shrapnel wound on his forearm. "Uncuff him," Miller said softly. Braden blinked. "What Sarge he was resisting? I need to process him." "I said uncuff him. Now." Miller's voice didn't rise, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Sarge, I can't do that. He's a suspect in a felony investigation." Braden protested, looking confused. Miller stood up. He was 3 inches shorter than Braden, but looked 10 feet taller. "Boy, you have arrested a Master Sergeant of the United States Marine Corps, and unless he stole his own damn truck, you are currently holding a man who has served this country longer than you've been alive without a valid charge. Take the cuffs off." Braden froze. He looked at the wallet. He looked at Elias. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The suspect wasn't a drifter. He wasn't a thief. Elias looked at Miller and gave a barely perceptible nod of gratitude. "Thank you, Sergeant." Braden's hands shook as he reached for his key. He fumbled for the hole. The mechanism clicked and Elias brought his arms forward, rotating his shoulders with a grimace. He rubbed his wrists where the metal had dug in. "I apologize, Master Sergeant," Miller said, coming around the desk. "There seems to have been a catastrophic failure of communication." "Not communication, Sergeant," Elias said, his voice cold. "Judgment." The door to the watch commander's office opened and Lieutenant Freeman stepped out. He had heard the tone of Miller's voice through the wall. Freeman was a pragmatic man who spent half his day managing budgets and the other half managing liability. "What is going on out here?" Freeman asked, scanning the scene. He saw his rookie officer looking pale and a large black man rubbing his wrists while Sergeant Miller looked ready to commit murder. "Officer Braden here just arrested Master Sergeant Thorne for waiting for a tow truck," Miller said, handing the wallet to Freeman. Freeman looked at the ID. He looked at Braden. "Please tell me you didn't impound his vehicle." I left it on the roadside, sir," Braden stammered. Freeman closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "You left a vehicle which you suspected was being stripped on the side of the road unlocked." I thought—" "Lieutenant," Elias spoke up, "my truck is a 2022 F-150 King Ranch. It has about $10,000 of tools and equipment in the locked bed. If anything is missing when I get back to it, the city is going to be buying me a new one." Freeman walked over to Elias. "Mr. Thorne, I am Lieutenant Freeman. I am incredibly sorry for this inconvenience. We can have a unit drive you back to your vehicle immediately. We will wait with you until the tow truck arrives." "That's a start," Elias said. "But we aren't done here." "I understand you're upset," Freeman said, switching to damage control mode. "We can discuss filing a formal complaint, but right now, let's get you back to your property." "No," Elias said firmly. "I want the footage. I want the Bodycam footage from Officer Braden, and I want the dash cam footage. I want it preserved immediately. I know your retention policies. Sometimes things get lost after 30 days. I want a written confirmation that this evidence is locked." "We can certainly preserve the evidence," Freeman said, realizing this wasn't going to be a simple handshake apology. "But, sir, if you're released without charges, which you are, we usually handle this administratively." "This isn't administrative," Elias said, his voice rising just enough to command the entire room. "This is a violation of my civil rights under Section 1983. This officer profiled me. He escalated a non-threat situation. He used excessive force on a compliant disabled veteran. And he did it because he saw a skin color, not a citizen." Braden opened his mouth to speak, but Miller shot him a look that could have stopped a tank. "Shut up, Braden," Miller hissed. "I served 26 years to defend the Constitution." Elias continued, looking Braden dead in the eye. "I fought for the freedom of people who hate me. And I'll be damned if I come home and let a child with a badge treat me like an insurgent in my own state. I am filing a federal lawsuit, Lieutenant, and I suggest you get your city attorney on the phone right now." Freeman nodded slowly. He knew when he was beaten. "I understand, Master Sergeant. I will personally ensure the evidence is preserved. Sergeant Miller, please escort Mr. Thorne back to his vehicle. Take my unit. Braden my office. Now." As Elias walked out of the station, flanked by the respectful Sergeant Miller, he didn't look back at the rookie. He held his head high, but inside he felt a deep, exhausting sadness. He had won the confrontation, but the war was far from over. The lawsuit was filed on a Tuesday morning, 4 days after the incident. Thorne versus the City of Dalton et al. It was a masterpiece of legal drafting, citing the 4th and 14th Amendments, laying out the timeline of the stop and detailing the psychological distress inflicted on a decorated combat veteran. But what really set the world on fire was the video. The woman who had recorded from the roadside posted her video to TikTok with the caption, Cop arrests innocent black veteran for fixing his own truck. It went viral overnight. But when Elias's lawyer released the Bodycam footage which they had successfully demanded during discovery, the internet broke. Millions of people watched Officer Braden scream at a calm, standing man. They watched him twist the arms of a hero. They heard Elias's calm, "I am a master sergeant." They saw the contrast between the hysterical, fearful police officer and the disciplined, stoic Marine. Veterans organizations went nuclear. The VFW, the American Legion, and Black Veterans Project issued joint statements condemning the arrest. Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC all ran the story, a rare moment of unity in the media cycle. The headline, "Hero in Cuffs," was everywhere. The internal investigation into Officer Braden was swift and brutal. It wasn't just this stop. Once the investigators started digging, motivated by the national spotlight, they found a pattern. Braden stopped black drivers at a rate 4 times higher than his peers. He used force in 60% of those stops, compared to the department average of 5%. He was a liability that had been ticking for months, and nobody had stopped him until he messed with the wrong man. Elias sat in his living room watching the news. His wife, Sarah, sat beside him holding his hand. "They're calling you a hero again," Sarah said softly. "I'm not a hero for getting arrested," Elias said, staring at the screen where his official Marine Corps photo was being shown next to Braden's mugshot-like academy photo. "I'm just a man who knew his rights." "What keeps me up at night?" Sarah is thinking about the kid who doesn't know, the kid who gets scared and runs, the kid who reaches for his wallet too fast because he's nervous. What happens to him? Sarah squeezed his hand. "That's why you're doing this, to make sure they think twice next time." The city attorney didn't even try to fight it. The deposition of Officer Braden was a disaster. Under oath, Braden couldn't articulate a single fact that gave him reasonable suspicion other than he looked out of place. When asked what that meant, Braden crumbled. He admitted he hadn't seen a crime. He admitted he was angry that Elias didn't respect his authority. It was the nail in the coffin. 6 months later, the settlement was finalized. The city agreed to pay Elias Thorne $850,000 to settle all claims. It was one of the largest payouts in the county's history for a single arrest. But the money wasn't the headline. The headline was the consent decree. As part of the settlement, Elias had demanded policy changes. The department had to implement mandatory de-escalation training specifically modeled on the military's tactical patience protocols. They had to install an early warning system to flag officers with racial disparities in their stops. And Officer Kyle Braden was not only terminated, but the department also surrendered his certification to the state, ensuring he could never be a police officer in Texas again. Elias stood in the parking lot of the VFW hall. It was a crisp autumn evening. He had the check in his pocket. He wasn't keeping it. He and Sarah had already set up a legal defense fund for veterans and minority youth who faced unlawful police stops. He leaned against his truck, the same silver F-150. He looked at the American flag waving above the VFW building. It was tattered at the edges, faded by the sun, but it was still flying. Sergeant Miller, now retired himself, walked out of the hall and stood next to Elias. They didn't say anything for a long time. They just smoked their cigars and watched the sun go down. "You did a good thing, Elias," Miller said finally. "You cleaned house." "I didn't want to clean house, Tom," Elias replied, looking at the smoke curl into the air. "I just wanted to fix my radiator." Miller chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "Well, sometimes you get the mission you ask for, and sometimes you get the mission you need. You showed them that dignity is a weapon, too." Elias nodded. He thought about the young officers who would take the new training. He thought about Braden somewhere out there, hopefully learning that respect is something you build, not something you demand at gunpoint. He put out his cigar and opened the truck door. "Come on, Tom. First round is on me, but I'm driving." "Deal," Miller said. As they drove away, the streetlights flickered on, illuminating the road ahead. It wasn't a perfect world. There were still shadows. There were still dangers. But for tonight at least, the road felt a little bit safer. The end. This story isn't just about a bad stop. It's about the power of knowing who you are when the world tries to tell you otherwise. Elias Thorne didn't fight back with fists. He fought back with the truth, and he won. What would you have done if you were in Elias's shoes? Would you have been able to stay that calm? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and if you believe real patriots hold authority accountable, hit that subscribe button to support the channel.